Welcome to the International News Channel, News LD. Today we present to you a news entitled,
More surgeries being scheduled, but not enough to clear pandemic backlog, nationwide data suggests. Canadians continue to face longer wait occasions for joint replacements and an array of most cancer surgeries because the COVID-19 pandemic progressed, a brand new report reveals, placing additional stress on hospitals and provincial governments to deal with the backlogs, all whereas the nation grapples with a healthcare staffing disaster and in growing old inhabitants. Launched on Thursday, contemporary estimates from the Canadian Institute for Wellbeing Info, CIHI, an impartial, not-for-profit group that gives data on Ontario, Canada's healthcare system, recommend main dips in surgeries within the first 2 years of the pandemic continued to have a ripple impact by 2022. The latest data reveals that whereas the month-to-month variety of scheduled surgeries is nearing pre-pandemic ranges, that is inadequate to clear the backlog and enhance wait occasions, reads the CIHI report. Do you all have a query, expertise or story tip to share? Ship an email to ask@newsld.ca. There have been shut to 36,000, or 20%, fewer knee replacements carried out nationwide between April 2020 and September 2022, in contrast to pre-pandemic ranges. Hip replacements weren't far behind, with 12,000, or 11%, fewer procedures carried out throughout the identical interval. These drops translated to longer waits. In 2022, solely round half of sufferers had a knee substitute inside the beneficial 6-month time frame, versus 70% earlier than COVID hit, whereas fewer than 60% of individuals had hip replacements inside the beneficial time frame, in contrast to 75% pre-pandemic. The data reveals catching up has been tougher for joint substitute surgeries, that are primarily carried out in hospital working rooms, than for cataract surgeries, which could be carried out in day process rooms or neighborhood clinics. The report continued. Tracy Johnson, CIHI's Director of Wellbeing System Analytics, stated widespread surgical procedure cancellations in 2020, adopted by closures throughout later waves of COVID, all contributed to the backlog. Ongoing worker shortages in hospitals are making the issue worse, she stated, coupled with increased demand for joint replacements lately due to Canada's growing old inhabitants. The actual surgeries which might be farther behind are people who we name scheduled surgeries. They're ones which might be not life-threatening, continued Johnson, noting that individuals' high quality of life and skill to work are sometimes nonetheless impacted within the meantime. Each hospital is struggling. It is a feeling Julia Barbagallo is aware of properly. Regardless of being identified with osteoarthritis, a degenerative joint illness, a decade in the past, the Laval, K. resident tried to preserve an lively lifestyle, doing actions like CrossFit, jogging, mountain climbing and martial arts. But as her situation worsened, her mobility grew to become extra restricted. Now, at age 55, she requires a cane to stroll and says her hip is in fixed ache. It goes from the groin to the hip to the again, contained in the hip, down the knee, Barbagallo defined. It is at all times transferring and it retains me awake at evening. One surgeon advised her the look ahead to a hip substitute could possibly be a year and a half. One other stated it will be a year. Barbagallo and her husband are additionally exploring a sooner route to surgical procedure at a non-public clinic, at a price of roughly $30,000. My well-being is deteriorating. Principally, if I do not do that as quickly as doable, she stated. Dr. Thomas Forbes, surgeon-in-chief at one of many nation's largest hospital amenities, the College Wellbeing Community, UHN, in Toronto, stated clinicians really feel the ache of sufferers caught ready and try to deal with backlogs as great as they will. The variety of sufferers in UHN's personal surgical backlog is now shut to 5,000. He stated. Dr. Thomas Forbes, surgeon-in-chief on the College Wellbeing Community in Toronto, says clinicians really feel the ache of sufferers caught ready for surgeries, and try to deal with backlogs as great as they will. Craig Chivers, CBC, we are working at shut to 120% of working room capability, Forbes continued. We're opening up extra working rooms on the weekends. We're opening up different care areas corresponding to process rooms to act like working rooms to cope with a few of this backlog that additionally permits us to strive to meet the priorities of a few of our extra-intensive, extra-emergent care. Numerous ranges of presidency are additionally making broad strikes. Federal healthcare funding directed to the provinces contains $25 billion earmarked for a number of precedence areas corresponding to backlogs and healthcare staffing. Some jurisdictions are additionally shifting extra to privatization, together with Ontario's plan to cut back surgical waitlists by shifting extra procedures to privately run for-profit clinics. And method mired in controversy as some medical consultants recommend it's going to probably improve the true price to taxpayers and will even worsen wait occasions. It is all a difficult balancing act. The underside line is the present crunch may lead to long-term pressure, Forbes stated, as hospitals are nonetheless juggling all the opposite affected person wants, from cardiovascular care to neurological points to transplants. The truth is, I feel each hospital is struggling considerably with their capability, he stated. Watch, ERS confronted with late-stage most cancers diagnoses throughout pandemic. ERS confronted with late-stage most cancers diagnoses amid pandemic. Hospital emergency rooms are seeing a wave of sufferers being identified with late-stage most cancers after the COVID-19 pandemic pressured many docs' workplaces to shut or pivot to digital appointments, meaning to fewer most cancers screenings. Dr. Pierre Mann, president-elect of the Canadian Orthopedic Affiliation, says the system already had an issue earlier than the pandemic, with an estimated 160,000 or extra Canadians now ready for orthopedic operations and roughly half of these involving knee or hip replacements. We now have a disaster, he stated. It would take innovation and an all-hands-on-deck method to guarantee extra sufferers get the care they want, Mann stated, noting that may require an ongoing give attention to workers' recruitment and retention to make up for the healthcare staff who left the occupation throughout the pandemic. We won't go away the individuals who have ache every single day, who cannot return to work, who cannot pay their payments, he stated. We'd like to take care of them. We'd like to be inventive. Most cancers surgeries delayed a day or extra excessive priority. Most cancers surgeries confronted delays final year as properly, although the lags have been extra minimal, CIHI data reveals. Between April and September 2022, the variety of breast, bladder, colorectal, lung and prostate most cancers surgeries carried out was about 1,000, or 2%, fewer than in the identical interval in 2019. The data did not embody figures from Quebec. Throughout that very same time frame, CIHI's evaluation suggests that dip translated to roughly half of Canadian sufferers ready 1 to 3 days longer for many of these procedures, and about 12 days longer for prostate most cancers surgical procedure, in contrast with pre-pandemic wait occasions. On a person degree, if we have been scheduled for surgical procedure on a Monday and your surgical procedure was modified to a Tuesday, which may not really feel essentially vital to you, stated CIHI's Johnson, so it is robust to inform whether or not these 1 or 2 days are literally affecting sufferers at this time limit. It does, nonetheless, add one other layer to ongoing issues over delays to screenings and surgeries that might end in extra Canadians experiencing life-threatening bouts of most cancers within the years forward, as CBC Information has beforehand reported. One earlier overview of Ontario's breast, lung, colon and cervical most cancers screening packages confirmed that in early 2020, there have been initially simply over 951,000, or 41%. Fewer screening exams performed in contrast with the year earlier than, a quantity that then stayed decreased than pre-pandemic ranges. Final year, scientists warned the drop in screenings may imply fewer invasive most cancers diagnoses, delays in therapy, and extra danger to sufferers' well-being. Lengthy earlier than surgical procedure is even on their radar. No fast fixes. Oncologist Dr. Timothy Hanna, a clinician scientist on the Most Cancers Analysis Institute at Queen's College in Kingston, Ontario, stated that is nonetheless his greatest concern. I'm additionally involved about people who have but to be identified with most cancers that developed over the past number of years. We now have but to see what impact these delays can have on the surplus variety of superior most cancers diagnoses in Canada, he continued, in an email change with CBC Information. Worldwide proof for breast most cancers suggests early developments towards extra superior most cancers diagnoses throughout the pandemic. To deal with backlogs going ahead, the provinces and territories will want to exceed pre-pandemic surgical procedure numbers, the CIHI report harassed. Johnson stated the group will proceed working with the provinces to accumulate info on the extent of ongoing surgical backlogs, together with extra give attention to present wait lists quite then retrospective data. Federal funding to the provinces, efforts to recruit extra workers, and higher data assortment are all items of the puzzle, but the problem goes to be that this stuff all take time, she stated. I do not assume there's any fast fixes.